To discuss the importance of international marketing research, let's start with a small example they provide in the book about Japanese versus English, and Japanese language versus any language at that. The Japanese language has three different languages called the hiragana, the kanji, as well as the katakana. And each one of them are their own alphabets and systems. And in that is the hiragana, which is the basic way of pronouncing and speaking Japanese. The kanji is the Chinese characters of the words. And the katakana is another alphabet that allows you to differentiate between foreign words and domestic words. So, for example, fork and spoon are American or Western words, and you'll see it written in katakana. And so you have to understand these differences just to speak that language, let alone the nuances and the complexities in that self, where Japanese language, business language, is about putting one up or putting one down, and also dialects and different ways of saying things. As I learned in German, there's the Tyroleans in Austria do not speak the same from one mountaintop to the next. So how do we research a market that's like this, that is so different from our own? Then we should be careful and consider outsourcing or having experts around us that understand these nuances of the market that we're dealing with. And that's just with the language. It's not just that's not including the culture. That's not including business dealings. That's not including any operations or go-to-market strategies, and as well as just understanding consumer buying habits of the products themselves that you're trying to sell. So just be aware that there's so much you need to research and be aware of, that maybe an expert, that inevitably an expert would help you. So consider outsourcing. And in doing that, consider how outsourcing. In other videos, I've explained data equivalencies and research bias. You could still fall victim to that if your market researcher is not aware of this. Particularly, say if it's a local subsidiary and they're not able to communicate to you in a way in terms to what we are able to interpret data as. So be careful with that. Multicultural research is becoming a big deal. Many companies operate globally on a daily basis. Apple iPhone has to get their product into multiple markets at a single moment from product introduction. So, when it's introduced in Germany and France, it's introduced in the United States. Movies now are even introduced to markets almost at the same time than they were, 20 years ago. So you want to be able to do multifaceted, multicultural market research, where you could actually take data in multi-layers and compare and contrast them. And it can help you either determine new markets or how to utilize those market behaviors, because you'll have better understandings of it. So just, if you get into one of those teams, there will be a big team and you're part of a bigger team. You're an individual in a part of a bigger team helping decision makers. And that's kind of fun and exciting. Or if you're sourcing through a big global marketing firm, that they have their subsidiaries able to create multicultural research methods for you. So, by the way, none of this stuff is cheap. When outsourcing or doing it in-house, market research takes time, labor, and money. So just be ready for that. So when we ask for an expert opinions, these will help us. For example, we might want to market eyewear to Germany, and we have this cool eyewear. We want to have a consultant who's in the eyewear industry who can communicate to us about market potential and growth and key players, competitors, and potential buyers of our product. There's also analogies you want to create. Maybe you want to assume the market's going to develop at country X going to grow at X, Y rate. So we might want to know what that percentage growth means in terms of our growth per year. We want to be at GDP or more always. You don't want to be growing or lagging behind the general market, especially if you're a massive company. So that's another way to understand market demand, or at least have a baseline. There's a lot of different methods. Predicting the future. I want to say this quickly. You cannot predict the future, really. We can help have ideas of what they will be, but how it actually happens or what happens to get there is inevitably different. So if you knew the future, then you have the $1 billion, $1 trillion winning strategy, but that's not always the case. So we're only predicting and hoping what the future will be based on the data inputs that our decision makers are using. So estimating market demand, assessing our current, by using our current market situations and analyses, and our own primary research helps us better determine that market future. So don't think that you know the answer to the future. Just be prepared to have flexibility as a decision maker. I already covered this in a previous video about limitations of foreign data. It's based on the size of the markets and trustworthiness of the sources that you're getting it from. So just be aware of that. So conducting market research in a decentralized manner, particularly for multicultural research, you might want to be careful with, does the entity abroad do their research? Is the analyst being used local and knowledgeable? Because the more you start spreading out from your own company for others to help you, for example, a big global marketing firm with a lot of subsidiaries, we want to know who's actually doing the research. Because there could be communication issues, there'll be cultural issues, ensuring that the equivalencies and biases are managed well in the research. Yeah, I agree with this one. Obtaining and analyzing data is half the job. Most of the decisions and all the decisions you shouldn't be going on gut feelings for your market research or your market decisions as an executive. A lot of data is out there, and a lot of ways to interpret data has become very streamlined and normalized that you shouldn't be making decisions on a whim. Impulsive decision making is unhealthy in personal and professional lives. So do obtain information correctly, and you've got half the job. Mistakes still happen. It always happens. But as long as you have relatively sound data, you can make hopefully the best decisions. How do we find a different firm? It's very important to know that there are different options. Option A is company to agency to customer. We have a domestic culture agency who will do our research. Well, we might want a more localized research. So we will go to, as a company, to an agency with a local agency abroad, and they'll outsource the agency to a local agency for more direct information. And as a company, you could go to a subsidiary that you have abroad. Say you are operating in Spain with offices there. Your agency there, your subsidiary there could do the work, but also could work with an agency locally that they trust and know to work with their customers. And then a company can work with a foreign agency directly with their customers. All this has their pros and their cons. Just understand that, option A, I don't recommend unless it's really big and they really know what they're doing. But in that, they have to have subsidiaries abroad of their own. Option B is really good because they might have a client. You might be already working with this company for a long time, this ad agency or this market research company. They will probably have a point of contact that they trust abroad, taking out that hard research for you. And then company option C, where you're working with a subsidiary, they're your team. They know you. They know exactly who you are. They have a much better refined relationship than the established market research agency you're dealing with locally. So let them choose the market agency that they know will do the research that we need. And option D, working with a foreign agency, that's challenging. You got to choose somebody you don't know at all. So you have to have your research done about what you're looking for, how you're looking for it, what your budget is, and the qualifications of this agency. Can they translate the language properly? There are methodologies to language translation, so you won't even be aware of that, to make sure that translations are one-to-one through whatever methods that are out there. So don't just assume, so the foreign agency is challenging. Unless you have an established relationship with them, choosing one can be quite hard.